so I'm not going to repeat that. But the beautiful thing is we have a couple of cadets here now who will be our panelists this morning, and I'll let them introduce themselves. James, if you would, please.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Cadet Specialist James Booker from the University of North Georgia. I'm a third-year majoring in cybersecurity, as well as a 25 Bravo IT specialist with the Georgia Army National Guard. So I have a little bit experience with the signal side. So.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Ethan Reddick. I'm from Statesboro, Georgia, and I'm the Cadet Battalion Commander for the Georgia Southern Eagle Battalion. I'm a computer science major, not a cybersecurity major, but I've been delving into cybersecurity, and I find it super, super interesting and really cool. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aiden Lenz. Rising junior over at the Citadel, studying cyber operations and computer science. So yeah, really excited to be here. Just coming back from an internship over at Fort Meade, the NSA experiential tour. So yeah, really excited to talk today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maximilian Tobigan. I'm a rising senior at the Citadel right now, Papa Company. I did an internship this past summer with R Cyber just down the street at the GCC. My major is cyber operations and computer science. I've been delving deep into collective remote attestation and Internet of Things, and I've been doing research on that. I'll be completing that this coming year.
Okay, awesome. Two things of note. First is I've been told you have to be here for 60 minutes, so get comfortable. And the second thing is if you have a question at any one point in time, please feel free to raise your hand. I've been told you have to come to this mic so that everybody can hear you, and it is recorded. So if you please would come up to the mic and feel free to ask questions of our panelists. We're going to begin with the 2023 National Strategy that was just signed in March of 23 talks about defense against and response to cyber threats. So Aiden, if I were to ask you what you think about cyber threats and our response mechanisms, what would be your first thought?
As far as like national threats go with cyber-related things, I think protecting our critical infrastructure, looking at like power grid and water, protecting stuff like that, because if those systems get compromised, it affects the general public at a large scale. Like if an oil pipeline goes down, like people aren't driving to work, their electricity goes out, like that has a really large effect on the population as a whole. So,
James?
Yeah, what Aiden said, but also just self-education. I feel like a lot of people misunderstand how far we've come with the tech that we have currently. So just understanding the security measures that they need to put in place, the education portion is very important, because the basic things could lead to disaster. So if they don't know the simple things, it could lead to bigger things being messed up in the future. So just self-education is very important.
And that's a great question. So most of us in the audience, we didn't grow up with this technology and this capability. So Max, if I were to ask you, how do we reach that younger generation under you that is growing up with this capability? How do we advertise and get to them the importance of cyber principles at any level?
That's a good question. We all know the younger generation is more adept at learning technology nowadays. They know a lot more and they learn quicker. I think we should start them easily in middle school or high school. It was going off what Booker said on self-education. If we can start them in high school and middle school instead of college, I think this would transgress into a higher priority for cybersecurity as a nation as a whole, and this can impact the civilian world as well as the military side. By doing so, we can progress faster in the innovation for cloud computing. We can do it for data manipulation. We can do it for infrastructure. We can do it for cyber policy. Having the younger generation take these classes or take certs, start them. There's no age requirement. You just need to know the information. if you start them younger in high school, middle school, you'll get a higher quality of a pool of candidates to get jobs for the civilian and the military side as well. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, and Ethan, please.
Yes, sir. I would definitely say that a lot of people maybe don't understand how much the importance of cybersecurity permeates almost all sectors and subjects. Like to reference what Aiden was saying for the last question about critical infrastructure being attacked, things like the pipelines. You could point out like the Colonial Pipeline incident in 2021 with the Russian-based dark side group. Maybe a lot of people, when they think of, kids coming up thinking like, what am I interested in? How is it important in the grand scheme of things? Maybe a lot of people don't understand the way that cybersecurity, the way the world is now with everything being so interconnected is so critical to things properly functioning, right? Probably, maybe a lot of kids wouldn't guess that a ransomware cyber attack could completely break down an oil transportation pipeline. You see what I'm saying? But I definitely agree with starting people early and just getting people to understand how much cybersecurity permeates society. Thank you.
Well, and to follow up with that, cybersecurity is a very large field, as we all know, and people use that nomenclature to cover just about 47 different disciplines within cyber as it stands. So, James, if I were to ask you, within cybersecurity, what aspect of it excites you the most?
Well, for me, I would definitely say the blue hat side of things, the defense, is really my go-to. I think that's the most interesting with just even like for me, like sports, I've always been a defense person. So like the San Antonio Spurs, I've always been like, it's my go-to. Because I've always just been a defensive person. I feel like you can always, even if your attacks aren't the strongest, as long as you have that defense, I feel like you're going to be somewhat better off. So I would definitely say defensive side of the cybersecurity excites me the most. I like learning the most about that.
Nice. And Max, I know you did your capstone part of your exercise here at Army Cyber this summer. What excites you most about cyber? Or what got you into it?
So what got me into it, I was technically supposed to be a biomechanical engineer. However, my teacher poached me in a matriculation day at the Citadel. So I kind of switched really quick, but learning about how large the pool was, the opportunities, the wide variety of where I could go. I wasn't technologically savvy when it came to computer science, not whatsoever. But I like reading, I like writing, so I thought about policy. But I just took this internship at RSI, I learned about data manipulation, allocating information to BDPs, big data platforms. I'm also interested in cloud computing. These are aspects that can grow. Like, it's not something that's stagnant right now. Every aspect in the cyber field right now is growing, and I'm actually interested in starting to go this school year into talking more about infrastructure, because that also is a critical aspect right now in the United States.
Great. So, Aiden, if I were to ask you the very same question, but also associated with your capstone exercise, for those you don't know, in your junior and senior year, you have to select a topic within cyber, and that is your exercise that you begin to develop papers, work on your research, and then also develop and present to your faculty. What would be your aspect of cybersecurity that you're working on?
So just based off my internship this summer, just kind of looking into IoT and smart devices that are found within homes and whatnot, and just how widespread and popular they're becoming, and all the vulnerabilities that they bring with them and how they can compromise a network's security as a whole. So just looking into pen testing for those, seeing the different vulnerabilities, I found that really interesting, and I think it is a growing issue because probably everyone here has an Amazon Alexa or a Google Dot or whatever in their home, but they never consider how that could affect them negatively, where it just seems like it's a convenience. So,
Ethan, the same question, I guess, is for you. With your coming over to Cyber late, what do you see as is how does cyber impact your capstone exercise, and what are you looking at?
So for me, coming over into cyber, the thing that I just found so alluring about it was, I think that before, when I had such a focus on computer science and just the general development side, I kind of had this naive mindset, almost like the cybersecurity aspect of data being kept safe in transit and at rest was kind of just something taken care of by secure protocols. I was like, the protocols are robust enough. I was kind of like a child that thought that food just magically appears in the refrigerator, you know what I mean? And then as I've started learning about things, it's like, wow, supply chain attacks, distributors getting breached, and then the way that an attack can spread like that, and it's just like, wow, there's so much depth to protecting data, which is really important to everybody in society. And as I've seen just how critical that is, it's been like, wow, what a important job to have and to be able to keep people safe. As far as my capstone, I've actually just gotten into my capstone class at the beginning of the semester 2 days ago, so haven't started really working on that yet, but that's what has drawn me into cybersecurity and why I find it so fascinating and urgent to learn about and so cool. Thank you.
So as we talk about policy as it relates down to deterrence within the strategy aspect of it, how do you see the best method to go about deterrence of our adversaries, if you will? And Ethan, let's go back to you.
So the best method I would say for deterring against adversaries, I would say for a short-term thing to make a more immediate impact would just be going back to widespread training on relevant tactics that threat actors are using, because as always, the threat landscape is changing constantly, and we need to be in close communication with our allies anytime a new vulnerability or threat is detected. But yeah, I would say close term is training, and then just making sure that we can remain adaptable at all times as stuff is changing so quickly, just due to the nature of stuff being so interconnected. We wouldn't want some vulnerability to happen and then some large exploit happens and then it spreads. We want to make sure we have good network segmentation within the military to keep that under control.
Okay. And James, I'm interested in how you grew up and chose cybersecurity as a degree field. What got you fired up in your maturation process that made you choose this degree?
Definitely. Just the tech field in general, just growing up, my grandmother, she's like different in the fact that she would always try to stay up to date. So a lot of times she would have her legacy systems, right, when she was growing up, and then she would get the newer stuff and the newer stuff. And then when I was born, she would get the newer stuff. So I've always had the ability to mess around with, the legacy systems, legacy consoles, and then the newer stuff. And that just basically what got me into the tech world. And then from there, I'd say about high school, that's when I did some research on my own, figured out I didn't like coding as much as I thought I did. And was like, okay, what else can I do that's in the tech field? Game designer, it sounds cool, but I don't think I really want to do that. So then I was like, cybersecurity, okay, I can problem solve, learn, like constantly learn. And I was like, okay, this is basically everything I wanted, and I'm capable of doing it. So that basically was my point of like, okay, I'm going to commit to this. And then that's when I joined the University of North Georgia, started my major, and then took off from there. So I'm glad I picked it.
Awesome. Max, the same question goes to you. What got you fired up and excited about this degree at the Citadel?
Just the opportunities and also the people. I've met people from a wide variety across the world. I'm originally from South Africa. I have a friend who's in the same major with me from France. I have a couple people who are from India and England as well. So like just meeting different cultures, but also creating a diverse group of people makes you think differently when it comes to coding itself. It's a whole nother language. So having that diverse group of people, it also creates a personal connection with everyone else, but you also learn how to problem solve differently, going off what Booker said. So that's really interesting. I like that aspect. So yes.
Okay. So just so everybody knows, in the classrooms, what we talk about is policy, but we also talk all the way down to coding. So we talk about either defending forward and then subsequently how far forward do we defend? Do we rely on allies? Do we, work within our own infrastructures and try to prevent those attacks locally? So Aiden, if I were going to say, how do we do this from your perspective? What do you think our best deterrent method would be?
When talking about cyber, it's not, like a conventional warfare where we can rely on allies to, hold an extended border away from us, from our home territory. Like, when we're talking about the cyberspace, our enemies can pose an immediate threat to us at any time. So as Ethan was mentioning, like widespread training amongst, if we're just talking about the Army, amongst every soldier, educating them on things like, creating strong passwords and, maybe not answering the email they get in their inbox about a free iPhone X. Stuff like that, education on phishing attacks and things like that, I think would help a lot.
Okay, Ethan?
Yeah, I would say, like I already mentioned, just the education of the soldiers, but now actually, since we're talking about, being so interconnected with those allies, it's almost kind of a interesting dynamic where previously with like conventional land warfare, the more allies you had and the more connections you had, perhaps the better. I think it's making kind of weird noise. But it's actually, I would almost say that with cyber being so interconnected, almost poses more risk, right? Because you have more kind of routes into your network, your connections, and you really have to make sure, almost like how a business would want to make sure that their third-party vendors have adequate security and are compliant. Now you've got to be making sure that these nation states that the military is closely coordinating with are also holding themselves to the same standards and not cutting corners, if that makes, Thank you.
And as a part of this degree, we always talk about risk management. And the risk management of data security, data integration across the board. So with talking data integration, if I were to say, hey, how do you think data integration can be secured, what would you tell me, James?
Could you explain that question a little bit more?
So data integration, where we used to have data lakes and data ponds, and we used to keep it individually. Now everybody's trying to rush to merge data to keep it secure. And as we merge those data lakes and data ponds to subsequently have one large database to pull from, how do we secure that?
Gotcha. That's a good question. Nowadays, I would definitely say our cloud platforms are very important when it comes to that, because a lot of companies in the military relies on cloud platforms, those hybrid systems. So I would definitely say the cloud is very important when it comes to that.
Okay.
Making sure that's secure.
Max, what would you tell me if I told you, hey, AI is the future and we all need to get on board?
That's a great question, sir. First, I would have to go back to a model. It's been beaten into my head, like figuratively. Risk, vulnerability, and assets. You got to realize who's at risk, who's vulnerable, what are the risks, and the assets, so the money, who's in charge of funding it, and who's in charge of running these operations. So if AI was the tool that we need to hop onto, I would say yes as a nation, because the capabilities are endless. Like, we already see nowadays just social media itself has blown up in the last 3 months. We got ChatGPT, now we got people able to do like clone other people and make them, we have pictures moving now where people can take pictures of their families back in the 1800s and have their faces moving. You got these, the capabilities are endless. So hopping onto it, we can probably progress into future, hopefully having holograms and stuff like that with AI-generated algorithms as well. And I think AI can be a useful tool as well for complicated problems.
Okay. And Aiden, this next question's for you, and that is, we talk about, again, growing up with this data. My question to you is, what's next? what's the future for data integration, the future for cybersecurity, the future for, I mean, when I grew up, I was in college before I saw my very first computer, and it was a Brother, and it had a screen about that big. And that was the first time and probably the last time within my military career that I ever got to play with computers. But, you know, we've seen the evolution to so many things. What's next down the pipeline?
Well, I think first off, we have to recognize that like problems cyber related that existed, 10 years ago are still going to exist today and further down the line. Different organizations, are not going to keep their systems up to date. That's why, hospitals fall victim to a lot of ransomware attacks and whatnot, is because they have very outdated systems that are vulnerable. So I think just recognizing that those problems aren't going to go away, so we need to try to mitigate them to the best of our ability is definitely an important thing. A risk that I see further down the line, Max kind of touched on it earlier, with AI and deep fakes and things such as that. I think, as far as different social media propaganda and the spread of misinformation is a huge, huge problem. If somebody can, pretend to be the face of the President of the United States and put out a false message, that's definitely a very big issue that should be taken seriously, especially when misinformation can be spread just as easily as factual information. So.
Awesome. And Ethan, that's kind of, he brought up a very good point about disinformation. How far do you see that going in the future? I mean, is there a stopping point to where we can fix some of that?
Yes, sir. I would definitely say that the concept of advanced language models being able to generate quickly just blatantly false content used to spread disinformation, I think combating that is actually probably going to be a seriously difficult task, just because it is difficult to regulate what exactly people are sharing, kind of thing, and it's difficult to have people really try to even seek out that the content they're consuming is true and have them verify that. I think a lot of people perhaps see stuff, hopefully this will change over time, and maybe just kind of generally believe it. They have this kind of bias for trusting this, and I think that's going to be difficult to fight with language models, especially as we move forward with potentially having state-sponsored language models that are just absolutely massive, and just seeing the kind of things that they can produce and spread. It's going to be a very serious thing to tackle, disinformation, I would say for sure.
Okay. I'd like to offer it to the audience for any questions to follow up with our panel. Please.
So this is for Cadet Booker. So the question I have is you grew up in the Georgia Guard, you said, right? 25 Bravo. How did that prepare you for where you are with your degree in college? Did a lot of that stuff that you learned as a Bravo kind of apply and help you? Because one of the things is, senior officers and people that have been around a while, we always look at that and say, are we training our young guys the right way, right? Or young soldiers, sorry, to make sure that they're experienced well enough and have the knowledge base to come in and make a difference from the get-go. So you had a unique experience where you took that training and then applied it into the college. So question, just an assessment of how you felt like the Bravo training got you ready.
Yeah, I definitely felt like it prepared me. I definitely felt like it kind of made it made everything I learned much easier. All the concepts sounded familiar. Even if I forgot it, I'm like, oh, I remember that from somewhere. Okay, that was from Fort Gordon. I remember that course I took. It basically made like a foundation for my learning experience so far. Because although it's cyber, it's a lot of stuff that's different. It's a lot of stuff that's similar. So it helped me a lot, put me above my peers. So.
Now, one other comment.
Please.
So as an ROTC cadet, graduate in 1992, I think it's amazing that our battalion commander is a cybersecurity guy. It used to be, it was always the infantry guy, the armor guy, or the aviation That's pretty cool. Just an observation.
Awesome. Thank you. Please. He's going to have a tough one. He's taking his time walking up here. Get ready.
Yeah, for anybody who's interested, I'm curious from your perspective, kind of going through training and everything, or education, balancing mission requirements and access with cybersecurity, and ensuring that we're able to actually execute and get access to the resources that we need in order to execute the mission while working with risk management. What are your thoughts on that? Anyway.
Max, you're first.
Yippee. I understand where you're coming from. I dealt with that this last summer as well. There was a lot of information going up chain of command, a lot of information coming down, a lot of it being misinterpreted, and also a lot of it not being understood as well. Going back to one of the earlier questions, how can we get a large pool of data and how can everyone access it? I think a solution to that is, yes, there's going to have to be fewer access originally from the data pool that we're pulling this information from. This will reduce the vulnerabilities that it will be, or reduce the amount of vulnerabilities that can occur. Now, we used the SW key when we were working with our data, but we created our own. We used the cloud, but we only had a few amount of people who can access it. I couldn't even access it myself. So if we have keys going off like a middleman, or doing having encryptions with these large amount of data pools, it can reduce the risk and the vulnerabilities. Now, going off your question, you said, can you repeat the second part of your question?
Yeah, so, when we talk about risk management, a lot of times I think a lot of leaders look at that as risk avoidance. So I guess to phrase it another way, maybe to help, do you think that there's enough of that perspective? Do you think there's enough conversation about that in our cybersecurity training programs?
No, there isn't. That is exactly right. Risk management is not risk avoidance. We should test it. We should see how far we can go before something does occur. Otherwise, we're not going to know the full capabilities of what we're using. That's just, we're all scientists here, okay? That's what we do. We test, invent, we do hypotheses, we run programs nonstop, and we debug them if they don't work. We constantly problem solve the issues that go ahead. But if we do risk avoidance, if we see that it doesn't work and scrap it, maybe it was probably the next Bill Gates idea. We don't know. We need to go more into risk management, having everyone understand what risk management is. This can lead to further progress in not just risk management, but it can also lead into infrastructure policy, it can lead to data manipulation, data information allocation, natural language processing, all these, the whole wide variety of everything, right? So yes, that's a great question, sir.
Thank you. And I will tell you, just so everybody's aware, at least within the University of North Georgia, we have probably 450 students in the cyber degree process. And that's at the start of the year. Traditionally, there are young men and women that come in and see, okay, this was not what I thought it was. There's a lot more discipline required in study. There's a lot more that I need to learn. And we traditionally lose anywhere between 25 to 50 within that first semester of training. So it's a very disciplined requirement for study. So Ethan, if I were to ask you, what kept you in this degree? Because again, knowing that it's a very difficult degree to go through, how did you keep yourself motivated through it?
Well, I think I definitely do have somewhat of an inclination towards software and just computer hardware for as long as I can remember. So that's been helpful to me, but I think the real thing that kind of was like, whoa, set the excitement ablaze was certainly just learning that it was real serious work that had to be done by someone to keep all the data safe, which is an absolute non-negotiable in our modern world. It was just kind of that moment where I was like, wow, there's way more depth to this than I thought. I didn't realize there were so many angles of attack and things that had to be watched out for, and seeing that what could happen as a result of cybersecurity and data security being neglected and just seeing how that can just completely crumble some serious stuff and impact, I mean, all different types of society and just things that people interact with on a daily basis, and how it's even more important for something as gigantic as the military to be able to work effectively. That was what's kept me in. It's kind of this, it's almost like this do or die thing. It has to be done effectively. It's a non-negotiable, and just seeing that it's definitely not going away anytime soon. I mean, this is just the way that the modern world is now, and this is like one of the most important things. Seeing that and seeing the value of it is what's really kept me motivated.
Awesome, and I will tell you, Aiden, I know as well that the Citadel has the same amount of numbers in terms of their cyber degree field. So what kept you motivated in that degree field to want to stay, to use the discipline that you have grown up with? You know, what's kept you there?
Just the longer I've stayed in it, the more I've learned, the more my interest in it has grown. You know, the more I've you know, delved into the subject, I just see the bigger you know, the bigger the need for people in the cybersecurity field is, and I want to be a part of the, you know, the workforce that helps to address that. So.
Okay. Any other questions before I move on? Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. Dr. Harris, I am owner of Ashard Technologies out of Central Florida. So a lot of the focus and the points that you guys have highlighted today are very external. I'm curious what amount of focus the program has on insider threats, and what your thoughts and approaches are addressing insider threats, how you mitigate and how you address.
May I ask a question in return? So you guys are not military, you're private contracting, correct?
Correct. We work with military.
Okay, so for insider threats, would you say it's mostly social engineering from your side, or would you say it's more backdoor kind of threats?
We're saying anybody within the perimeter of the system environment.
I would say it's got a, it's a tough question. You wanna answer?
I think as long as we're always abiding by the concept of least privilege for everyone, and making sure that the network is segmented so that if someone does fall victim to a social engineering attack, you do have some type of accidental insider threat, or you know, a developer leaves a backdoor in the system and then you know, maybe gets fired and wants to get back at the company, anything like that, that the damage that they do can be contained, and just you know, always making sure that you have robust logging tools, making sure people aren't like sharing passwords or doing anything, so that if something were to go wrong, that there's no reason why you couldn't easily lock it down and be like, okay, this happened here, this person did it, and just making sure there's no kind of corner cutting going in terms of those areas, is what I would say.
Any thoughts on like the social factors, or do you guys look at things like that, things that are happening in people's lives that would cause you as a cybersecurity professional to be on a heightened alert?
I think a lot of people nowadays are very comfortable in the workplace, especially like with their phones and social media. So I know a lot of people like to take pictures, like in the military, in places where they shouldn't be taking pictures. Stuff like that is like a little thing that leads to a bigger thing. So I think people need to realize there's a time and place where that, you know, that comfort to be that much comfortable. And there's a time and place where, you know, it's work time, it's no social media time, and I think that's part of it. Part of keeping it safe is just a little stuff like that.
And if I can
Yeah.
piggyback on top of that real quick, is Aiden, this one's coming to you, brother. And that is, we talk about intellectual property, and you're talking about theft potentially internal to a group. How do we protect that intellectual property through the things that she's discussing?
You know, I'm not really sure I have a great answer for that, as far as just practicing good cyber hygiene and whatnot, because it comes down to the individual. It starts small, but it can grow exponentially. So, yep, that's
Okay.
all I have to say about that.
Thank you very much.
And you stole my points. Well, and this is to Ethan, to you. We always talk about everybody wants to get on a keyboard, everybody wants to code, everybody wants to play the end user. And then we talk about policy and regulation of that. How do we find that middle road between how far down should we regulate, even within the military, versus people wanting to be on keyboard and be the cool guy that stays behind the curtain and types away?
Yes, sir. I think that it is very exciting to look at the kind of the development side and be the builder, to be able to put the tools in people's hands and those end users' hands and see them being used. But making sure that we always place a large emphasis on testing and QA, making sure that software is built with security in mind always, and that there's no type of weaknesses. We don't want any issues with the software from a security standpoint that would only get worse as the software got larger. So I think that that's something that really needs to be stressed, the importance of the testing and the robustness of the software. And so in terms of compliance and regulations, I think that it is unfortunate to have to make development slower. People want to maybe go fast and build really cool things quickly, but having that security underpinning, that foundation as the software grows, is just so critical, because it would just be so much larger of a headache trying to fix those kinds of issues once a project is larger, if the compliance and regulation isn't kept strict from the very beginning. Thank you.
Awesome. And Max, this one goes to you as well, and it's a derivative of the same question, to where everybody wants to red team. Everybody sees that's the cool thing, is I want to do pen testing, I want to test my skills against somebody else's skills. Again, how far into regulation do we need to go to protect ourselves from that insider threat, from this theft of intellectual property?
I learned recently that here at our Cyber, there's a difference between a developer and there's a difference between a programmer. So a developer, you're a jack of all trades, but you can also master on your own certain trades. A programmer, you sit behind the keyboard and you program, right? I'm not trying to we need programmers, right? I'm not saying we don't, but delving into, as you said, Red, how far do we go? I almost quit the major 6 times. I'm one of those students that would have been gone in the first semester, but I had buddies and faculty and staff that literally kept me going until I kind of hacked it, got into it my second and third year. You need to get your toes wet a little bit before you can make that decision. Yes, everyone's gung-ho, ready to go, red team, blue team, and ready to attack. Send them in a little bit, see what they can do. I would say we have virtual labs now. We can send practice teams in there. You can see how difficult it can get. It's not cut and dry for everybody. If they can get field experience on that on a virtual reality or in a virtual lab, they can understand the difficulties, and they're like, okay, maybe I don't want to do red team, maybe I want to go policy. Maybe this person's great at criminal justice and they can write really well and speak very well. So I think we're doing it right now. We're getting all this information from different wide variety on cybersecurity. I think it's just diving a little deeper, see if they like it or not, and they can start focusing early on in school or in their own time or outside of school.
Okay. I'm going to shift from that. My next question is largely both to the audience and to the panel members. I'll start with the audience first, and in the simple fact that we at the universities have funding to send young men and women to get certifications. I've been told a plethora of, hey, this certification's better than this certification. Recommendations, good Lord, as to which certifications you think are most valuable for these young men and women to go attain prior to their commissioning and or graduation.
So I think the reliance on certifications is kind of certifications. As a hiring official, I've hired a lot of people that had certifications that really didn't help them do their job, right? So I think personally, I'm looking forward to the cyber framework that the DoD is putting out because it kind of is getting after all four pieces of that, right? There's more to just the certification.
Okay.
Can I add on to that?
Please.
So being on this side of the table, you know, trying to see what jobs I'd be able to get, it's very confusing. Say like Indeed, I like to look on Indeed or just like Googling jobs to see what this job would want, like certification-wise, experience-wise. And a lot of them are like 2 years experiences, and this is like entry-level jobs. So it's like, dang, okay, how do I get this experience? Or another job would be like, you have to have security plus, you have to have network plus. It's like, okay, I need to get these certifications. And it's just very confusing when you're trying to research and, you know, get your foot in the door. But just, for me, what I'm trying to do is just learning. I feel like as long as you know what you're doing, that's more important than a piece of paper. And that goes a longer way than, you know, those certifications. So I guess that's, for me, that's how I thought of it. It's just like, as long as you know what you're doing, you're good. You're going to be better off.
Please.
I have a bit of an opposing viewpoint. So prior to being a technology professional, I was a cyber supply chain professional, and I had a supply chain certification, and it stated that I understood general concepts that are required for me to perform at a certain level of responsibility. So as a technology professional, I think you mentioned there was 40 plus different types of career paths and programs that all fall under cyber. Well, certifications are very similar. So it really comes down to what area within cybersecurity you want to work. If you're looking at administrative controls and you want to focus on, you said you're a great writer, you want to write policies, and you want to make sure you're implementing controls, then, you know, highly recommend the CISSP. It's going to put you on that path. If you want to be behind the buttons, you want people who have, you know, tech work and testing, you're certified ethical hackers. So I would say research the certifications. They are industry standards right now, whether it's within the government or not. They help you prove to yourself what you know in terms of overall concepts. They give you the discipline that you need, that you're going to take those skills into the workforce. And the companies that invest, or the schools that invest in those certifications on your behalf, are partnering with you on your future. So I think, you know, do your diligence, do your homework, and follow the path that you want to study and you want to work, and then pursue the certification from there, because it will help you stand out amongst the crowd.
Sir.
So going further into that, would you say that's more important than the knowledge? Like, so say I did not have the,
No, not at all.
Okay,
So
okay, okay,
The certification is almost validated to the broader public a certain minimum level of knowledge, right? So you've got to have the knowledge in order to acquire the certification, and it just gives you that next level of.
We'll go with him real quick. Yes, sir.
So to give you guys all, because you're in ROTC, in a way you do have a leg up on the general public, because while you're in ROTC, you're not only gaining the knowledge, you're also gaining the experience. So that 2 years of experience that they're saying that they want from you, by the time you graduate from college, you already have that 2 years of experience. So you can kind of throw that out the window. Now you have to focus on, as he was saying, you have to really focus on the knowledge that you're going to gain from college, certification, and while some people say focus, I say focus would be broad. So you can go Security Plus, or you can go CEUs, which encompasses Security Plus and a few other things. See what I'm saying? So you really look at where you want to go in cyber, and then focus on that, but branch out a little bit, because you may end up, I wanted to go networking because I love routers and switches, but I ended up in Microsoft. So you're saying I ended up on the Active Directory side. I still do routers and switches, but my primary job is Active Directory. But I was able to branch out into Microsoft, but I still keep my network and switches. because I never know where I'm going to end up 5 years from now. It's the same thing in cyber. Cyber changes way faster than networking because you still got the same router, switch, Juniper, you still got all of that. Cyber changes like almost every week or something is different. So you can't really pinpoint cyber. You really got to broaden your, you got to have that periscope. You're looking through a small, but it's opening up big. So don't limit yourself, but at the same time, you kind of got to limit yourself because you don't want to dive into a big ocean. You want to stay into a little small pond. That makes sense to you.
Hey, Chris, can I turn the question?
Please.
A little bit?
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. So I'm General Stanton, Commander of the Cyber Center of Excellence. So I'd like to ask the panelists, how do you put in perspective and define what it means to be a leader of technical professionals? And what are you doing to prepare yourselves for it?
Ethan, go ahead.
Well, sir, I think to lead in a technical profession, it's very important that you be very technically proficient yourself. And so, for example, what am I doing, as well as taking my computer science classes at Georgia Southern? I've been taking the Google Cybersecurity Professional Certification, and I'm a little bit over halfway done with that, and that's been so fun for me to be able to do all these interactive labs and just to be able to take these courses and get the certification. For me, I think that certifications are not too bad of a thing because I think that, if you're a lifelong learner, that like you have to be in a field like this where things are constantly changing and you've got to always be adding to your stack of knowledge and things are always adapting, that if you're keeping up that lifestyle and always learning, always adding to the technical skills that you have, that's going to really benefit you as a leader of technical professionals. Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
This is your prep for our conversation.
right. No pressure.
Set you up.
Okay. Yeah, like Ethan mentioned, I think building your own personal technical background is really important. But also going along with that, as we commission and become officers ourselves, I think it's important to not, trade in your interpersonal skills and your ability to lead other individuals. I think a lot of times people might focus on their individual training too much and forget that they have to lead a team of people proficient in that. So, I think there's two sides of the coin. And I think that's one of the best parts about the Citadel is we get thrown into a lot of leadership roles and positions just through our Corps of cadets and whatnot. So I think my ability to lead within the Corps is going to help prepare me as well as my work in the classroom, like working on my Sec Plus and stuff like that. Thank you.
I think just being at SMC is a great idea, just like a great influence because first step, you got to become a follower. If you're not a good follower, you can't understand as a leader what the followers need. So if you become a follower, you understand the pains and the aches of being told what to do, what you need to do, what you have to accomplish. And I think the next step is when you become the NCO, corporal, you can be a sergeant. Then you start understanding the small leadership amounts of qualities you need and what you have to do for your followers. What are the basic needs? They need to know what time, they need to know where the meetings are. They need to know the correct uniforms for certain amounts of the day. And I think finally as a senior, you get to take a lot of responsibility, not just for your actions, but also for the people underneath you. It's a high stake, but you also understand as a leader, you got to be able to have the technical traits as those followers. You're the one they're looking up to. When the saying goes, when it hits the fan, you're the one that's going to get in trouble, not the followers. You need to know how technologically savvy they are in their degree. And I think if you're proficient enough in those, you don't have to do everything. Let them take the role. Let them take the lead, what they're good at. I think allocating and just letting them take their role in their, I think everyone understands what I'm getting with that. So, yeah, sorry.
More so than a leader, I would say being a teacher is the most important part of being a leader. And I don't mean explaining stuff. I mean how you present yourself. What are you doing? Are you, doing the right things in front of your subordinates? I feel like that's the most important part when it comes to leading is, are you that teacher that is the role model for everybody to look up to? So,
And I will interject that I think part of the leadership aspect is the derivative of the core of cadets at whatever university. If you put yourself in an environment where you learn from somebody else, either by trust or by, I won't say volition, but you're learning how to, as you progress through your collegiate careers. And that can't be underscored. At least from my perspective as a cadet when I went through the university, and I'm not going to give you the date time group. Unless there's any other questions, I would like to kind of wrap this up, please. We got one in the back.
So mine's not really a question, it's more, has to do with several of the questions that were brought up, but really when it comes down to is respect and relation. So you can know how something works and not really respect it, or know what it does but not really respect it. And the best way to really kind of get that forward as a leader or as a teacher, or even getting it down to the younger generation, is analogy. Like, people learn best with analogy. So like with firearms, for instance, if you want somebody to learn about a firearm, the best way is to break it down at its basic level, teach them what it's capable of doing, and always treat it as if it's capable of doing that at any time. So, you know, whenever you have a firearm, even though you know it's loaded, you are taught never to point it at something. So, with that respect, if people understand the technology and know at the worst what it's capable of doing, then they'll respect it and want to understand more, as opposed to just seeing an email pop up in an inbox and, oh, well, that doesn't really concern me, whereas technology concerns everybody these days. You can't get away with, no matter what job you're doing, not in some form or fashion touching technology. So analogy is probably the best way to do that. And with what you were saying in regards to certifications, you know, one of y'all is at the Citadel, one's at University of North Georgia, and while y'all might do the same degree, the standards are probably not the same. So, and you relate better with somebody that you has gone through the same thing as you. So in the military basic training, it's the same pretty much for everybody, Army, whatever. And you respect somebody that's gone through the same thing. So certifications, that's standard across the board. So while you might go to the Citadel and he goes to North Georgia, you don't know what the standards are there. But if everybody has the same certification from CompTIA or Cisco, you get the respect and the relation of knowing that that person knows the exact same thing that I do, and it's taught, and the test I took is at the same standard. So while experience is very, very important, the certification is just as important, if not more important. So I just wanted y'all to keep that in the back of your head. I'm very early on in my military and IT career, but certifications is probably, I think that's the coolest thing is you can, oh wow, that person has 4 certifications. Even though we both have a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity, he's got 4 certifications, I only have 2, and I know that he's at that next step, and I can respect that and strive for it.
No, that's a great point of standardization of an educational platform you can see based on how many certifications that person has reached a level of at least officially professional standards, and that kind of leads to the hiring process potentially. I'm going to end it, if you would, please. And the one thing that I will tell you as a University of North Georgia graduate, and as I went back to that university, I challenge each and every one of you to go back to your universities. Because we have young men and women that you see at the Citadel, Georgia Southern, and the university here who are asking questions and need some feedback. And the best way for you to do that is get involved with your university. Go back to them. There are young men and women that need your guidance and your support in the development of their careers. So I would ask you, please, regardless of where you come from, go to your university and provide feedback because they need it. They've got so many things being thrown at them on a daily basis. Cyber is a very big word, and not a lot of people understand every aspect of it. And those young men and women need your support. So with that, Patricia, I thank you for your time, and I will yield back to you.